Hey there, I'm Chris, as you probably know if you're watching this video, and I've not made a video in a while, so sorry about that. Drosophile Volume 2 coming out soon, hopefully. And yeah, today I just thought I'd do a tutorial on installation of my FPS configs. Um, I did make a tutorial already on the site for this, but people still get it wrong, so I assume that they would possibly get it more through an actual video tutorial. So that's what I'm doing since I have some free time today. Um, so, first thing to do is to take a look at the site and choose which config you're actually wanting to use. So my site is going to be in the description. It's also fackerbrigade.eu/chris/configs. And so when you're choosing one, there are some screenshots which I took a while back, but it still should look the same now because they're basically the same. So this is DX9 frames. It's the only one of my configs which runs in DirectX 9. And the main thing here is the lighting, the way, just the lighting basically, and there's some one or two bits of sort of texture on the ground which are just not really needed. And you can see if I go to iframes here, you can see this texture in the bottom, sort of the middle right, goes away, and that's just because of the one of the CVARs which I've set to 0 on my DX8 configs, because it just doesn't. There's no point. You can also see there's quite a large difference between max frames and high frames. The majority difference here is the filtering on the light maps and on the textures. Now, a lot of people have the misconception that this actually increases FPS. Now, it really, really doesn't. Maybe you would get 1 FPS, but I would be surprised at that. Smoothing, maybe in 1995, cost you some overheads, but really that's not going to be your bottleneck. That's not going to be what causes you to lose FPS, really. I wouldn't worry about it. If you prefer high frames, go for high frames. If you like that look, go for that look. If you prefer this look, then you're a little bit weird, and you should probably see someone about that, but you can go for this one. But I wouldn't expect an FPS difference between them, at least any noticeable FPS difference. So yeah, go for the one you want. Today I'll be going for high frames, but it'll be pretty much the same procedure for anyone which you choose. So I'll just open it up here, you can see on the left, and you'll get this lovely pre-formatted page of the config. So one mistake some people do make is going File, Save Page As. Don't do that, because as you can see, if I open the source, there's all this HTML. So don't do that. That's only because I'm a validation sort of a bit of a fiend for validation, sadly. But yeah, what you got to do is go Control A to select all, Control C to copy it, and then we'll go into Notepad. He says, having disabled his search, Winky R. So once we've got Notepad up, you can just paste it in with Control V or Edit Paste. And now we've got all that in, and it's looking pretty good, so now we can just save it straight up. And you're going to want to save it in your TF2 folder, which I have over here. So you can see Team Fortress 2 here, and we just go in there, and then you go to TF. By the way, you can see my structure up here in case you're wondering how to get here. It's just in Program Files, or probably Program Files x86 if you're on a 64-bit operating system. So Program Files, Steam Apps, your username, Team Fortress 2 TF, and then we go into the CFG config folder. Now this is pretty blank because I just re-extracted all the game from the GCFs, and now just to get a nice default game. Yours will probably look quite similar, but what you're going to want to do is go into CFG, the config folder, and save it as autoexec.cfg. Now, on earlier versions of Windows, you could just go like that, and it would save it, and it would ignore this save as type, and it wouldn't save it as .text, because you run the risk in certain situations of saving as autoexec.cfg.text, and the game engine won't execute that automatically. You'll have problems with that. You really want to make sure you don't do that. So what you should do in this situation is, for Windows XP, that's fine. I've not tested Windows Vista, but I assume it's the same as 7. For Windows Vista and 7, so remove the quotes, and go to all files, and then you can save. Make sure your encoding is an ANSI, by the way, because I think the source engine has some problems with Unicode and Unicode Big Endian. So yeah, we'll just save now. So that will now automatically execute upon the launch of the game, but there are some things you probably want to change first. So firstly, you see this FPS cap thing. There's a little description I put, caps FPS to improve performance. The best value for this is your monitor refresh rate, or your frequency, times 2 plus 1. I won't go into the details of that here or why that is, simply because you possibly won't understand it, or the majority of viewers of this video don't really care. But suffice to say, that is the best value, assuming you can get that value stable. So if you have a 60 Hertz monitor, you probably want to go for 121 FPS max. If you can't get that value a lot, then maybe lower it a little bit, but optimally that is the value you should be setting. You can also see, do not set lower than CL-CMD rate, or you will experience hit rate issues. So CL-CMD rate is the amount of updates you're sending towards the server, and it's based on the number of frames you are generating. So if you cap your frames lower than the number of frames you're trying to send to the server, you're going to have some data which is missing, and that's going to cause you potentially hit registration issues and various other X is not working, Y is happening, etc. So make sure your CL-CMD rate, which is in these next bit of options, is set higher. It's your FPS max is set higher than your CL-CMD rate. And on TF2, I think the minimum limit is 40 for that, and the maximum is 66, which is the maximum that the OB engine supports anyway. So now after that, you can set up these net settings. Now I have net settings for good connections and net settings for moderate or bad internet connections, and a lot of people ask me on IRC what is the actual difference between these, what actually determines a good or a bad internet connection. Well, the primary difference is whether you're getting good routing to the server, and whether you are getting good you're getting good no packet loss, for example. You're just having a good connection. Now this is all pretty personal. You should really use both and work out which you prefer, or which is better for the servers you're frequently on. For public servers, I would definitely recommend going for these ones if you're mostly a public player, because a lot of public servers are just not equipped to handle with these sort of high rates, but they should be alright with these ones, so go for those if you're a public player. There's also this little thing which says change to 0.024 for hit scan and change to 0.0375 for hit scan. This is just a percentage higher than the original CL insert for projectiles. I'm not 100% sure why this is. I've never really looked into it, but it does seem to provide a nice buffer for hit scan registration. There are some people who claim that anything other than CL update rate divided 1 divided by CL update rate is inferior. There are people who claim anything other than that is inferior, but in my experience, these are the better values if you're using hit scan weapons. So a hit scan weapon is stuff like the Scout's pistol, scatter gun, the sniper, stuff like that. Stuff which hits the moment you press the button, or near the moment you press the button, whereas projectile is obviously something like the demo man's pipes or stuff like that. So yeah, just choose whichever one you want for the class which you're mostly going to be using, and leave the rest alone. Really, people mess around with stuff like CL lag compensation, CL pred optimize, CL smooth. Just leave them the hell alone. There's a big misconception going around all the time that CL smooth somehow helps against laggy opponents, but it doesn't. It only smooths your view model after prediction errors. So A, if you don't get prediction errors, you shouldn't have that problem, and B, it simply won't help you really. I mean, if you're playing competitive, I'd recommend just leaving that off. And CL smooth timer set just in case the server does force CL smooth 1, but that's pretty low anyway. It shouldn't be any different from CL smooth 0. Now there's some more stuff down here which I won't go into so much. It's just like enabling sprays and disabling sprays. On war servers, on competitive TF2 servers, these are pretty much always disabled because of SV Pure 2, which blocks custom materials and custom textures, which sprays are. So you can just basically leave this alone if you're playing competitive, or mess around with it if you're in public. There's also enabling and disabling shadows. Now there is a bug on the, I'm not sure if it's in the original source engine, but it's definitely in the Orange Box engine, where shadows, high quality shadows, can show through walls if the person is close enough to a wall. Now, people have gone on about, oh, this is a bit dodgy, but a lot of people use it. A lot of people do use this in competitive TF2 because it's never been fixed. So the best way to do it, I think, has been agreed that it's not a cheat, it's just something people use, it's a quirk of the engine. So if you disable shadows, you obviously won't get these shadows through walls that might show you if a soldier is hiding behind a wall or something. So you might want to, for a competitive edge, delete this section and have the shadows on up here. But if you're looking for performance, then have this. Have the ones at the bottom. Now there's also facial features here, which is like the movement of the face, what happens when they speak, stuff like that. So blink duration is exactly as it sounds. R eyes, R flex, R LOD, stuff like that. So R eyes determines whether the eyes are there. R flex determines animation movement when they're speaking. So 0 means their mouth doesn't move and their facial expression doesn't move when they're speaking. R LOD is needed to be set to 1, at least so it either needs to be 1 or 0 to have facial animations displayed. So if you had this in RLOD 0, RLOD 2, you would still get no facial animations because it's too low of a level of detail value. R root LOD is similar; it just sets the root level of detail for whatever's being displayed. R teeth is as it sounds, disable or enable teeth. And you can just ignore flex rules and flex smooth. Don't need to worry about those. So, also ragdolls here. You probably want them disabled. They do take some CPU when they come onto screen or when they're having their physics done. This is, I think, the default settings. You could, of course, change the time for which they're there, or you could like force them to fade earlier or force them to disappear earlier. But the majority of the CPU overhead when rendering ragdolls is when they've just died and when they are flying through the air or falling to the ground or whatever. So you probably want to set this to you probably just want to leave this alone and leave it on disable ragdolls, because to disable it you don't need to do anything. You just leave this section alone. And that'll save you some CPU overheads doing that. Gibs are the, in case you didn't know, which you probably do know, are just like the miscellaneous bits of the body which fly around when you explode somebody. And this, I won't go into detail about what each one of these does because the name is pretty explanatory. But I'd recommend leaving this disabled. It doesn't provide any advantage to you, it'll just lose you some FPS because of the physics calculations being done. Now, there are some things down here which are the rest of the config which you really shouldn't mess around with so much. I'll go into a few of them, but really you should leave this alone unless you know what you're doing. One of the big ones is monitor gamma. Now this controls the brightness. The lower the value, the brighter the screen, because it's saying how bright the monitor gamma is initially. So to compensate, if you set it lower, it will set the gamma higher, if that makes sense. So monitor gamma is that's the default gamma on the monitor. So lower, down to a value of 1.6, I think, makes it brighter, and higher makes it darker. And as I've put here, try 1.8 to get it brighter or 2.2 to get it darker, and it only works in full screen. That's pretty much standard across all games. Won't work in windowed mode. You'll just get the default brightness and default gamma set by your operating system or by your color profile. Let's see what else you might want to change. Oh yes, TF particles disable weather. Now this is for maps like Sawmill which have rain effects. So when a map has rain effects, this will simply just disable those effects. So obviously you can set it to 0 to re-enable those effects, but often they'll get in the way, and it can provide you a tactical advantage to disable them. Not that rain is a big problem, but on some maps it does go a bit overboard. What else? What else? Oh, MRAW input. Now, a few months ago, Valve added raw input support. So there's a system called WM Mouse Move, which is one of Windows API input methods for mice. And one of the big things about WM Mouse Move is it relies a lot on your Windows settings, whereas raw input just takes raw input from your mouse and doesn't require the middleman. So this is good to set on. Unfortunately, I've put it do not enable if you are using XVAR overlay, and that's because the XVAR overlay, I'm not 100% sure why it does it. I assume it hijacks the mouse for the overlay, and for some reason it doesn't like raw input. I guess it's tuned to work with WM Mouse Move. But basically, if you do that, you will get no movement in game. You will get absolutely no mouse movement. It just won't do anything. So if you're using the XVAR overlay, don't enable this. But to enable it, you can just remove the 2 slashes. That should be said for the net settings as well. When you're choosing net settings, just remove the slashes from all the ones which you want to use. And I'll just do that now because I forgot to do it earlier. So, is there anything else which I should be telling you about? Oh yes, on some systems, I have a pretty tuned threading setup here. It's not just the default which you get when you select multi-core rendering on in the menu, in the options menu in TF2. But this will work for 99% of systems. You shouldn't have to screw with it. But as I've put at the top of the config, if you experience just crashes for no reason, then you might want to try one by one setting them to 0 and working out which one is causing your problem, if it's them causing your problem. And that's pretty much it. That's all the custom configuration for the config, really. I may have added some more comments in this as to what to do if there's something specific at a time. You may have noticed here I've put on the 5th of April I put major issues reported on some, not all, PCs when specifying mat anti-alias directory. Try removing it if you have problems, and you can add plus mat anti-alias 1 to your launch options if that's what you wish to do. But that will Valve will probably fix this issue soon. So if you're watching this sometime in the future and you're riding in your amazing futuristic car and you think, I'm going to have to do that anyway, no, just look at the top of the config, see if I put any comments for stuff you may have to do there, and that'll be just specific stuff. So this is pretty much all the stuff which you're going to have to customize, or which you might want to customize. So now that we got it saved as autoexec.cfg in the config folder in TF2, what we're going to do is just close this, and we can also close that. And we're going to add, actually I've been a bit of a fool. I've been a bit of a fool and closed it, haven't I? Yes, I have. Terribly sorry. So yes, forgive me switching from Notepad to Notepad++. You can just think of this as Notepad. Pretend I'm not using Notepad++. But yes, you can see the launch options at the top here for full screen and windowed mode. Now, windowed mode isn't traditional windowed mode. Well, it is, but it's without a border. So you could use it at the same resolution as your desktop resolution, i.e. the resolution which you're displaying when you're just in Windows normally. And when you're setting that, if you set it to the same width and height as your desktop resolution, it'll just look like full screen. And one of the benefits is you can Alt-Tab into IRC or Alt-Tab and do anything and then come straight back, and there will be no wait time. There'll be no delay, it'll just come straight back. And you'll have no graphics bugs because of it coming back from Alt-Tab either, and it won't crash. So that can be pretty good. You may get some performance loss, but it'll be very minor. It won't be major performance loss. You'll maybe lose a few FPS, but in my opinion it's worth it simply because I play a lot of pickups, and I use IRC a lot to get games. So it's good for me to be able to tab out. So for now, though, I'm just going to be using full screen because a lot of people who are doing pubbing, I suppose, probably don't need to alt tab, so they can just use these options. There are some options which people have popularized, especially more has popularized stuff like heap size and stuff like that. I have a little guide to, if I go back to my website, I have a guide to the, actually, I think the one on TF2 is more up to date. If I can remember where to go, hang with me. Yes, so this is a little thread I made on all the launch options. I'll put a link to this in the description as well. There are people who have popularized stuff like, you can see heap size here. Really, just, if I've not put it in, I've not put it in for a reason. If you think I'm missing one, then please tell me about it, but really, I'm not. If you've just done 5 minutes of research and think you found one, you haven't, because it's either doesn't work, it works, works, but you don't want it because it'll cause problems, or like heap size, it was just pointless and people were just causing crashes by messing around with it without understanding what it did. So don't mess around with these really. You could add something like high to run it on high priority, so it's like the nice value if you're used to Linux or Unix systems. But this can cause some problems like mouse lag, because when you set the game to high, you're competing with device drivers, so you're competing with the drivers for your mouse and the input of your mouse. But it might be alright on some systems, but if that really does cause you any performance increase by having the high launch option, then you should really seek out the cause of the problem instead of that. And I've got more information in this thread, which again I'll have in the description. So for now I'm just going to use these launch options, and if we go back to Steam, so I've just copied those with Control-C. Now we go to Team Fortress 2, Properties, Set Launch Options, and paste them in. Now you can see here it's got width and height. Now this is a big mistake people make. People don't replace these. So I'm going to replace it with the resolution I'm using to record this video, which is my desktop resolution, so 1280 by 720. Now you can set these to whatever you want, as long as your monitor supports it, and it'll work. If you notice your game is just always starting up in 640/480 or something other, your monitor's lowest resolution, then you've set them wrong somehow. You've either not set them and you've left width and height in, or you have put in values which your monitor simply does not support. So yeah, so just basically change those and leave the rest. If you were doing windowed right now, you would want to set it to your desktop resolution, otherwise you would have space at the side of your monitor, which would just be your desktop, and it would not be very good. So yeah, now those launch options are set, we can just go straight into TF2. So we will just launch TF2. Right, so now that we're in TF2, you can see it's just the normal menu. We also have the console up by default. You can ignore these warnings here, can't use cheat CUL. These are just Valve being a bit lazy. But the main output is just up here. If you don't understand it, that's fine, just leave it well alone. And you can just close it or leave it open or whatever. Now, let's show you what the config looks like. So just loading a local server which has Badlands on. And you should notice that it looks, if you don't have a comparison in front of you, it looks pretty decent. It doesn't look very bad, and you get a lot of FPS, and the FPS by default is displayed in the top right corner. So we now have the FPS in the top right corner. I've got massively low FOV and view models on because it's just defaults. Yeah, you can see it doesn't look very bad. It looks pretty good, and I'm just getting solid FPS. Any drops I'm getting are just because I'm using Cam Studio to record this shit. Oh, profanity, terrible. But yeah, everything works as normal. Nothing's different except for the graphics, and the graphics, to be honest, don't look very bad. So yeah, there is basically my guide to installation of my configs. And any questions you have, feel free to come and visit us. There's quite a few of us there, so if I'm not there, someone else will be. In Chris TF2 on QuakeNet. And you can also go to factorbrigade.eu/chris/configs/support, and you can just automatically you can go that it'll take you straight there. You don't have to have an IRC client to do that. It'll do everything for you, and you will just see us, and you can just type !help me, one word, and the bot will alert us that you need help, and we'll try and get around to your support query. But hopefully this will have addressed all your problems and anything that might come up when you are doing the installation. So thanks very much for watching, and I will see you later.